Yeah, apologise in advance. We probably won't be able to get through absolutely all of them, but we'll try and get through a good selection. So I think the first one, let's have a look at. It's probably quite a nice one to start with. Who wants to take this one? From Robin. So why do bats actually need night roosts? Aren't they flying at night? It's quite a nice one to kick things off. Who wants to take that one?
Fiona.
Should we go for it, Finch?
I think Fiona's frozen. Fiona definitely will be more qualified. I think she's frozen, but yeah, she's gone. Why do you need night roosts? So a lot of time in the middle of the night that they will hold up, kind of they'll find somewhere to sit during the night and either kind of sort of have a little nap or digest their food. So they need these areas which are normally further away from the roost. So if you imagine you have a night roost 2 kilometers away from your actual maternity roost, they'll go out to these sites rather than having to travel all the way back to the main roost. And this gives them a place to rest and still access to the wider landscape as well.
Can I add something there, please?
Yeah, go for it, Roger.
With work done by radio tracking shows that they're used by matrilines, different female groups, as social gathering places during the night. And they're very important during rain. Whenever you get heavy rain, bats have to get shelter. So the more of these types of night roosts that are available in your foraging habitat areas, the better, really, because it gives them opportunities, you know, to utilize the local habitat. But I'll be talking a little bit about Steve's work tomorrow. But they are quite important.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that, Roger. Is Fiona back with us, or is she still? I'm not sure if Fiona's there. Okay, can't see her. I think we'll go on to another question. So we've got one here, which I think is probably, potentially quite an interesting one from Luke. This is research from the National Bat Monitoring Programme showed that climate change may be helping the UK population of great horseshoes to expand, and should we therefore be thinking long-term and creating suitable habitat further north? I think that's quite an interesting question. I think we've got, I say, if Fiona's not there, perhaps, I don't know if Roger or if you don't mind having any thoughts about that, or Finch, if you want to have any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I think yes is the answer. I think I know with lesser horseshoes as well, there's been records and greater horseshoes moving, more towards North Wales and stuff like that. And it's recently, this year and last year, there's been a couple of records over in Ireland of greater horseshoes. So they are moving, and they're kind of moving northwards. So yes, I think there is a need to have a long-term view of this, not just for greater horseshoes, but for many of the different species, and how those movements might impact other bat species further north as well.
Just to comment on something I'll look at tomorrow. Latitude is a key factor, and whilst we've got quite a lot of evidence of bats in small numbers spreading outside their traditional areas, there's a limit to how far north they can go set by the night lengths. So I think the opportunity to increase numbers is more possible from west to east than it is from south to north. But I'll leave the rest till tomorrow. Right. Okay.
Great, thank you, Roger. That's another question. This is for some of you, Finch, from Siri. So really interesting research. What understanding has been gained about how greater horseshoes use rivers and streams? Did that sort of feature in your research?
Yeah, I think I'm replying to some of them privately as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't, as I said, we didn't particularly focus on rivers or riparian habitats in terms of the project, specifically looking at them or how bats utilise them. But when we did put out the detectors across the landscape, of course, we did put them along rivers and these sorts of habitats. And they're really, really important for greater horseshoes. There's a lot of movement and feeding activity along river features. So yes, they're really, really important within the landscape.
Brilliant. Thank you. So another talk, I think you touched, this is again for you, Finch, I think you touched a little bit on this in your talk, but perhaps just for to clarify, some from Julian. Think about, can you see a role for Scape modelling in planning policy and identifying suitable development areas? And should it be used as part of ecological impact assessments?
Yeah, we would love it. We would love it to be. I think that's something that we're trying to kind of achieve with getting all the maps online and getting an app for it. I think it'd be really, really useful both for conservationists in terms of looking at how developments might impact greater horseshoe movement, but also looking for planners to use as well as local authorities to see where it is important before any decision is made about actually applying for planning permission or anything. So we would love it to be used. I think it's just time.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. There's another one here from Valerie. Just have to paraphrase this one, it's got a long question. So she's interested in bats that are a little bit further away from the roost and using the landscape. And so wondering, is that food, competition for food, the driver for why those bats are using those areas further from the roosts? Are they perhaps looking for other potential new roosting areas? So therefore, if that is the case, are those occasional passes which are recorded further from roosts, are they potentially more significant for the population and more important? And obviously the importance in how those areas are managed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does depend on the actual distance to roosts. Outside the roost sustenance zones, and if there's no known roosts and you pick up those passes, I think those areas are really, really important. But likewise, the outer reaches of the roost sustenance zones are still really, really important. It just shows how much the greater horseshoes can move in the landscape. And I think, yeah, like you said, they are just scouting. They are looking for potential new areas, and it could depend on the season as well. So different prey items in different habitat types are available during different seasons. So you could have them moving at different times of year as well. So that's why kind of keeping the core 4 kilometres of the roost sustenance zone is really important for the population around for the maternity colony. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Finch. There's a question here which may be one for Eleanor to pick up on. If not, we can always come back to it. From Tracy, asking, where do I find more information on the auto ID program that you used from the BTO as part of the Devon Bat Survey?
So that would be, it would probably be better for her to get in touch with Stuart Newson about that, I think, because the scripts and everything we use, that sort of, we were given it by him, and it would be best if she had a chat with him if she's thinking of running a similar project. But there's all sorts of auto ID software out there. There's with a lot of the more well-known software like Kaleidoscope and stuff, you can get auto ID software built in within it, depending on how much you pay. So yeah, there are other auto ID software out there. Yeah.
Great, thanks Diana. Is Fiona there? I think she's just...
I am. Hello,
yeah.
I'm now sitting on my stairs. The internet disappeared, so I had to go closer to the router.
Okay, great. That's good to have you back. There's probably one or two questions that be very good to have your thoughts on. one here that came in from Chloe, saying, great talk, Fiona. What are your thoughts on greater horseshoe bats in Cornwall and cross-county movements? And should more sites in Cornwall be protected through designation to try and provide some stability for those roosts?
Yeah, absolutely so. And we know that there are lots of roosts, particularly the ones that might have between 50 and 100 bats in, that are still not designated. And that's true, you know, whichever direction from Devon you move in. And I think all of those sites, we need to be looking at greater protection. I mean, I think sadly a lot of it is just a workload issue, so that, you know, they have been monitored, the data are there. It's just really a question of getting it through the Natural England process to get the designations on them.
Great, yeah, thanks, Fiona. There's another one.
I was going to say an extra comment on that is we also know that bats greater horseshoe bats can and do move quite long distances between sites. So, you know, the Cornwall bats will definitely be linked with the Devon bat population.
Brilliant, thank you very much. There's another one. Again, you touched on this in your talk, but probably just to clarify, from Barry asking, is there information on movement of greater horseshoes across the channel, and is there much collaboration with European organisations and colleagues? Obviously, you touched on some research you've done already on that in your talk, but yeah, perhaps just to clarify that point, if you can.
Yeah, so through Eurobats, I think quite a lot of people are in touch with each other, and certainly there's a big project at the moment in France because of the concern about the conservation status there. I know that the Kent Bat Group are in touch with their colleague on the other side of the channel as well. There probably is more that we could do, you know, in that clearly these bat populations are not very far apart, and certainly the ones in northern France are going to experience quite similar habitat conditions. And I know that there have previously been EU-funded projects to try and strengthen collaborations on other aspects of biodiversity where there's the similarities between Devon and northern France. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks, Fiona.
Can I comment on that, or something there?
Yeah, sure.
Unless you've got a big ringing programs going on in this country and in northern France, you're not going to get any evidence. But this has been done in the past, and for decades, nothing was recorded crossing the channel. The problem is the closest to France we get is in Kent, where we've got hardly any greater horseshoe bats to cross. So I think it's a question of big distances, and crossing large amounts of water is difficult. There was that strange odd greater horseshoe bat found in Ireland, but whether it had a hitch on some kind of vehicle, we're not sure about. Most unlikely, really. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. There's another point here, another good question. We're just raising the point really about giving the importance of trees in the landscapes and the effect that ash dieback is potentially going to have on greater horseshoes, using the landscape, projecting on hedgerows and woodland areas. So there's obviously a real need to to think about, I suppose, how we're replacing the loss of ash and maintaining a resilient landscape. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. Go to you, Fiona.
Yeah, I mean, ash dieback generally, there could be some short-term positives if it's creating roost crevices, but I think they're likely to be fairly short-lived because ash dieback tend to crumble and fall over or have to be removed. So I think, yeah, the disappearance of trees from the landscape is a worry. And I think in Devon in particular, we've got quite a lot of ash that is important. It's not necessarily within woodland, but they're often, you often get large hedgerow trees as well. So yes, that is a concern. And all we can do really is plant other things, or encourage the growth of other sorts of trees that are existing in hedgerows.
Brilliant, thanks very much. I think we've probably got time maybe just for one or two more. There's a comment here actually from, or a question from Stephen to Fiona about when you mentioned the low genetic variation in the UK greater horseshoe population. Are there any possible solutions that you can see for that?
So I think there's two issues there. One is that the genetic variation, we might be stuck with it to some degree in that there's not much exchange with the rest of continental Europe, and short of shipping great horseshoes across the channel, there's not a lot we can do about that. But I think what we need to be mindful of is whether on top of that we're getting into a situation where there's going to be inbreeding depression just because there's little gene flow. So my feeling is that we actually need more work on this to understand better the amount of genetic exchange that's going on between the various colonies. And you know, even within Devon, we're not very clear about how the different populations are exchanging genetic material. And I think also just making sure that we do have a good availability of mating roosts and conserving those mating roosts, because that's the problem. If you're down to actually a very small number of mating roosts in a landscape, that then boils down to actually very few males putting their genes into the next generation potentially. They might be very happy about it, but you know, making sure that those smaller sites aren't lost, I think, is key.
And maybe just one last question. Are there any insights into why the numbers of great horseshoes are not faring so well across the rest of Europe? The reasons for population declines there.
Yeah, Roger, do you want to come in on this one as well? Because you've obviously done a lot of work on this at a European scale. Oh, he turned off his video. He ran away.
Wrong. I clicked the wrong one. Sorry, I wasn't escaping that. Yeah, I was quite surprised at that, because I know there's a lot of stuff being done in France. They did a national scheme for bats, and when I go to European conferences and meet people, they're all busy doing things, and conservation is high on their list. Yeah.
I think there was a lot of issues with or the thought was that some of the problems in Switzerland and Germany and the Netherlands were to do with over disturbance, particularly in hibernation sites. But a lot of countries, as we have instituted grills and that sort of thing. I mean, maybe the other thing to notice is that in some parts of the range, you've had very big colonies that have dwindled to smaller sizes. So it's not that they've disappeared altogether, but just their populations are not in such good shape.
Yeah, I know that northeastern France was a disaster area due to agricultural intensification and a complete loss of foraging habitats from places that had really large colonies in the past. And I think that's a warning about if you get rid of pasture lands and you convert it to arable land, it's not going to be good news for greater horseshoe bats. But I'll talk a bit about that tomorrow. Okay.
Great, thanks, Roger. And I think I'm afraid that's probably all we've got time for. I know there's a few more questions I didn't get to, so apologies for that. But yeah, thanks very much again to our speakers, Fiona, Donal, and Eleanor, and also Roger for your comments here as well. That